This next piece is fairly detailed and is reminiscent of chapters in From Russia with Love. And the more you look into what went on in the past, sadly the same group crop up again, time and time and time again. And this is no different. So we're going to delve into the world of nuclear physicists, chemists, and bio research. And we're going to start with Samuel Abraham Goudsmit. Goudsmit is a shortened version of Goldsmith, which will tell the origin of his religion. Born to Jewish parents, born in Holland. An all too familiar path of these Jewish descent peoples coming from around the world and obtaining top positions and largely in very nefarious programs that harms people. Now Samuel moved to America and was quickly stationed directly into MIT. But he was also involved elsewhere, as this piece shows. He was head of the scientific head of the Alsos mission and successfully reached the German group of nuclear physicists around Werner Heisenberg and Otto Hahn at Hechingen, which was then a French zone, and the advance of the French physicist Yves Rocard, who had previously succeeded in recruiting German scientists to come to France. Alsos was involved in the Manhattan nuclear program, and he stated the Germans were never close to an atomic weapon, as the Nazi scientists had a lack of understanding of how to engineer an atomic bomb. Or could it be because of people like Mr. Goudsmit, all defected to America via Operation Paperclip, which was the second phase of that event, not the first. Paperclip in 1947 was the second phase, which is not as well known by most historians. The OSS were doing paperclip since the days of Tesla. And that final operation in 1947 involved 250,000 flights to and from America and Germany. 250,000 flights. Can you imagine the sheer cost of that operation alone? You bear in mind, America had barely come out of recession, and yet they can fund 250,000 flights between America and Germany with some psychopathic scientists. Now, predictably, Mr. Goudsmit is also involved in Egyptology. The Samuel A. Goudsmit collection of Egyptian antiquities resides at the Kelsey Museum of Archaeology at the University of Michigan. All very Sackler family to me. Otto Hahn was another of these nuclear physicists, also Jewish, to which he and the authorities went to great lengths to cover it up, it is said. Involved in advanced science of messing around with isotopes that too few understood back then, and was part of the Kaiser Wilhelm Group in 1906. That group was funded in part by the Rockefellers using the Students Program. Oops. That same program was later used by the CIA as a means to create spies or collect people of profiled interest under the National Education Act. You would think that was all to do with teaching. No. It's actually called the National Defense Education Act, ran by the military and the agencies under the banner of protecting Americans from Russians. Well, the Russians never came, and perhaps now a new National Teaching Act needs to be drafted that is not run by the war machine. But militaries running education programs is pure fascism. Just saying. And part of the dumbing down process here in America, as they wouldn't want properly taught soldiers going onto a battlefield and working out why they are really there, would they? No. All follow orders now and don't question what we tell you. That's the program. Just like school. The Kaiser Wilhelm Institute and its research facilities were involved in weapons research, experimentation, and production in both the First World War and the Second World War. During World War I, the group, and in particular Fritz Haber, was responsible for introducing the use of poison gas as a weapon, which was in direct violation of established international law. During World War II, some of the weapons and medical research performed by the KWI, Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, was connected to fatal experimentation on living test subjects in concentration camps. In fact, members of the KWI anthropology department, particularly Ottomar von Verschuer, received preserved Jewish bodies for study and display from Auschwitz. They won't tell you that in the Holocaust Museum, will they? Why? Because it was their own people involved in it, as we will see. Who provided those live and dead, in part Jewish bodies? None other than Dr. Greed himself, Joseph Mengele, who, despite stating publicly he hates Jews and they should all be exterminated, was, funny enough, surrounded by them in these programs. Does that make any sense? Jews doing hideous experimenting on Jews. And this is why it is important to grasp and understand the From Russia with Love series. Mengele and his Nazi Germany, as it is labelled, attempted to obtain this new territory by attacking Poland and the Soviet Union, Prussia and Russia, intending, quote, to deport or kill the Jews and Slavs living there, who were considered by the Nazis to be inferior to the Aryan master race, unquote. Neglecting the fact that the Russians and the Slavs were the Aryan race, both then and the past. Again, I ask, does that make any sense whatsoever? Now, Otto Hahn spent his third and fourth semesters studying under Adolf von Baer at the University of Munich. And in 1901, oh dear, under the Rothschilds family, Bayer. Adolf Bayer was a descendant of the Jewish family of Itzigs, Itzigs, and the original of which was Daniel Itzig. Daniel was the court Jew to Kings Frederick II the Great and Frederick William II of Prussia. Itzig was a banker and a mint master in partnership with Vital Hein Ephraim. Vital Hein Ephraim, who was also Jewish, were making fake coins together to debase the economies of the connected countries. Sound familiar? Ephraim and his companion Itzig became infamous for adding copper up to 70% into fake coins known as Ephraimitin, and the coin fraud of the entrepreneurs became an existential element of war financing. It always goes into war, doesn't it? Well, what you got to remember is the coins back then, in fact up until 1964, were largely made of silver, all silver. And no doubt they collected all the silver as well and lined their own pockets even further. And yes, certain mints around the world, like the Canadian one, are still doing it, or were. Now, together they leased all the mints in Saxony and Prussia, and during the 7 Years' War they assisted Frederick the Great in debasing the Saxonian currency and spreading the Ephraimitin not only in Saxony but in Silesia, Poland, Bohemia and Courland. All very Rothschilds and De La Rue company, that to me. Now, as a side note, and is supportive of From Russia with Love, the term Ephraim, said to be Jewish, but it's not. Ephraim was, according to the book of Genesis, the second son of Joseph and Asenath. Now, Asenath was an Egyptian woman who the Pharaoh gave to Joseph as his wife, and was the daughter of Potipharah, a priest of On. Here we go with the priest class again. Ephraim was actually born in Egypt. Listen closely. Before the arrival of the children of Israel from Canaan. Interesting line. The children of Israel from Canaan, not the country of Israel. The real words for that, or real line, is the children of the house of Israel from Canaan. I was looking at a fairly old map recently, this week. There was a place that is quite close to Syria called Israel, Izreel, which may be where that house resided, but nowhere near modern-day Jerusalem, which is much further south and west of Israel. Now, Hahn had a counterpart to this experimentation and building nuclear fusion for weaponry. Lisa Meitner, an Austrian born to Jewish nobility, under the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, and she later went on to become an assistant to another known person involved in these practices called Max Planck. Max Planck, also Jewish, also involved in nefarious practices, experimenting on how radiation would affect the body in what is known as the Black Body Radiation Program. Planck went on to establishing himself as the quantum-based theory for which he is now known as, but he was also a participant of propaganda or propaganda back in 1914. Let's see if you can see the similarities to now. The Manifesto of the 93 is the name commonly given to an October 4th, 1914 proclamation, originally titled in English, "To the Civilized World" by professors of Germany. Remember, Planck was Jewish, not German. That was endorsed, it is said, by 93 prominent German scientists, scholars, and artists, declaring their unequivocal support of German military actions in the early period of World War I. These actions elsewhere were called the Rape of Belgium. Now, the manifesto galvanized support for the war through German schools and universities, but many foreign intellectuals were outraged. Told you it'd sound familiar, didn't it? All very US military and the CIA, that to me. But the comparisons are eerie, are they not? That was all staged, that document, as it came to light later that most who signed it didn't know what it contained or were unaware of its intentions. But one of those who did sign it and knew exactly what it was Alfred von Baer. No surprise there. But it was also signed, knowingly, by Albert Einstein. Oops. Another involved in this underground nuclear fusion and people experimentation program. Of course, Albert was also Jewish. What may be significant is a piece that was written after World War I that may give pointers to this. Quote, "It is not true that we trespassed in neutral Belgium. It has been proved that France and England had resolved on such a trespass, and it has likewise been proved that Belgium had agreed to their doing so. It would have been suicide on our part not to have preempted this." So what does that say? So the Rothschilds, who control France and England, remember, along with the Dutch Jewish elements that created the fake country now known as Belgium to run their nefarious operations from Brussels, started that war, and they were all in on it. It also said it is not true that the life and property of a single Belgian citizen was injured by our soldiers without the bitterest self-defense having made it necessary. They were trying to stop it, what the French, English, and Dutch Jewish elements were doing. But the people who had propaganda ran on them, started shooting at them. That was said at the German leader at that time. Now it's funny, that was World War I. In 1945, just as World War II was coming near an end, the German leader then made similar claims that may get people to understand the propaganda used by the system that goes way further back than Langley and the CIA-based Routers group. Quote, "It is untrue I or anyone else in Germany wanted war in 1939. It was wanted and provoked solely by international statesmen either of Jewish origin or working for Jewish interests." Unquote. Max Planck helped his nephew, the economist Hermann Cranold, to emigrate to London after his arrest. Hermann Cranold was a member of the Social Democratic Party of Germany and established as a Marxist party in 1875. From Russia with Love covered who Karl Marx is and was. These are the same Social Democrats supported the war in 1914 and were also involved in the Bolshevik Revolution of November 1917 in Russia. Connecting the dots, yeah? Members of the left wing and far left of the SPD formed alternative parties, and the first one was the Spartacus League, and later became known as the Communist Party of Germany. Oops. Incidentally, Adolf Hitler banned this particular party in 1933. I wonder why. Bearing in mind, Adolf Hitler also banned the Teutonic Knights and the Freemasons. Does that make any sense? Something's amiss, isn't it? The Teutonic Knights had defeated the St. Petersburg and Prussia regions of Russia at least twice. And yeah, Hitler was allegedly having to attack Russia. Well, why wouldn't he want the Teutonic Knights who had done it twice previously? Why did he ban them? Why did he ban Freemasonry? And why did he ban a group that was involved in the Bolshevik Revolution of Russia? Does that make any sense? Now, I will repeat for those with short memories or agendas. I am not at any point suggesting Hitler was good. But what I am questioning is the official narrative and raising the question, not a statement, of was Hitler duped by the hidden elements? Remember, Hitler was not in the top order. That was the Black Eagle. Hitler was in the lower order, the Brown Eagle. And the great question is for people to ponder on. If the nasty Russians and the nasty Germans were defeated in World War I and World War II, and these were such nasty beasts that had to be slayed, with Hitler, Pol Pot, Chairman Mao, Gaddafi, Hussein, and other so-called despots all now gone, The question that remains is, why is the world still in such a mess? Then we come to IG Farben, a collection of chemical, genetics, physics and pharmaceutical companies. BASF, Bayer, Rothschilds again, Host, Agfa, and Chemische Fabrik Griesheim Elektron and Chemische Fabrik Worm. They were all accused by the Nazis of being, quote, an international capitalist Jewish company. IG Farben were accused by the Nazis of being an international capitalist Jewish company. A decade later, IG Farben was a Nazi party donor. And after the alleged Nazi takeover of Germany in 1933, IG Farben became a major government contractor providing significant material for the German war effort. For those who are new, Nazi is not German. It is National Zionism. The first two letters, N-A-Z-I. Not German. And they use countries as a front to hide who these people really are. Now, described as the most notorious German industrial concern during the Third Reich, IG Farben relied in the 1940s on slave labour from the concentration camps, including 30,000 from Auschwitz. One of its subsidiaries supplied the poison gas Zyklon B, which actually was delivered by Pope John Paul. That killed over allegedly 1 million people in gas chambers during the Holocaust. Again, it brings up the question of, does this make sense? An international Jewish company involved in using, in some cases, Jewish people as slave labour in camps, and then allegedly poisoning their own people. Something's amiss. Now, my understanding is based on viewing the pictures of the shower rooms presented as evidence of Zyklon B gassing. Actually, it showed zero evidence of Zyklon B being present in those camps named. It's not to say it didn't take place, but not in the camps that they name. Why would they lie? So why is that? Because Zyklon B stains the walls blue. There were no blue walls in those showers. What really happened is those people were not gassed in the camps. They were taken out by Jewish companies into private research labs, the likes of Kaiser Wilhelm and IG Farben, and gassed there for their experimentation. And this is why I've said these particular Jewish people are different. They care not for anyone, never mind their own so-called people. Now, IG Farben are stated to have removed all Jewish employees during the 1930s, and yet over a third of their board were known as Jewish, with more hidden under a smokescreen. It's lies. The sheer fact that Bayer was a large part of that group, confirms that Bauer is Rothschilds, who is operating as Jewish but under the banner of the Egyptian Ra and Solomon cults. Solomon was from Egypt, not Israel, and the Rothschilds clan bears the ring of Solomon. So the question remains, given what we mentioned earlier about Jewish poverty, how can a group of people, a fairly small group of people I might add, given the demographics, who we are told have been murdered, persecuted, holocausted and thrown out of several countries, all rise to such prominent ranks of bankers, lawyers, minters, nuclear physicists, chemical warfare, think tank groups, all having the same religion? Again, it doesn't make sense. It's one point arguing against the other. Or how can two women who are Jewish, Lisa Meitner and Marie Curie, who are both Jewish, rise to the higher ranks of business and involved in these experimentation things, while most women were banned from these higher-end establishments until well into the next century? Again, does that make any sense? How are these small group of people all in these prominent positions and a high percentage of them doing practices from illegal to pure evil? Why were so many of the prominent Jewish-based people involved in the Manhattan Project? Why were the CIA or predecessors of the CIA also involved in that project? Why have the CIA, who are stated to fight communism globally and yet have never attacked a country synonymous to Zionism, which created communism to begin with, as was stated by one of their own people, Israel Cohen? The final question to be raised is, given the above details, are the CIA actually the real communists, all hidden in plain sight? Maybe President Truman's words in 1963 will help. 16 years after he signed off on the National Security Act of 1947, the same year the now named CIA was set up. Well, like I said earlier, it was not national security for America and its people, but to allow the CIA and other agency-based goons to basically do whatever it wants globally without remit. And this is what President Truman said. During those historic and sometimes tragic 16 years since that act had become law, that he had witnessed changes that disturbed him as he saw that the CIA had been diverted from the original assignment that he and the legislators who drafted the act had so carefully planned. Although even in his time he had seen the beginning of the move of the CIA into covert activities, there can be little doubt that the diversion to which he made reference was not one that he would have attributed to himself or any other president. Rather, the fact that the CIA had gone into clandestine operations and had been injected into peacetime cloak and dagger operations, and has been so much removed from its intended role, was more properly attributable to the growing and secret pressures of, quote, some other power source, unquote. President Truman. And his final quote was, the CIA had become a symbol of sinister and mysterious foreign intrigue, unquote. I guess we've just disturbed their sound of silence.